Permaculture really starts with an ethic, earth care. That's care of the whole systems of earth and the species. So we actually devise model systems. Much of the design is drawn from nature. The end result that we aim for is to produce a system that's ecologically sound and economically profitable. It can get as sophisticated or as simple as you like. Every desert has a unique characteristic, and here in the Sonoran Desert, it's a large tree cacti. And here it's a saguaro cacti. A little further south, it's a cardon, a much larger cactus than the saguaro. And all of these cacti originally grew in forests that were usually up about as high as the first limbs of the cacti. And the saguaro can't continue to exist without a forest around its feet. It's because the young cactus can't exist in open desert such as we see around us. It has to have shade. So the saguaro are expected to last perhaps another 40 years, and then they'll be gone too. So the solitary saguaro, standing on its own in the sand, has become almost a symbol of desert. Instead, it should be a symbol of our stupidity in not taking care of the total environment. Like vast areas of America, this is part of the Great Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when most of the soil blew away. Between 1930 and 1935, Franklin Roosevelt had 3 million Americans out with supervisors and engineers repairing America. And it's the first time in American history and the last time. It's also one of the very rare times in the history of the world that anybody in charge of a country has put the people of the country to work to repair the damage. They built hundreds of miles of earth banks which held up the runoff water long enough to settle out the silt behind them and for some water to soak into the ground. And this is called swaling. And these swales were made by horses and scoops and men. And today we have bulldozers, but we don't do this repair work on country. It's very rich in the swales, both the soils and the trees. And we'll go down and have a closer look at that. Yeah, in the swale there's a green cover of herbaceous material. It covers up all the weeds and it makes a sort of a sandwich of weeds and silt that builds up slowly. This is about 60 years old. These were built by engineers for purely physical reasons to stop the gully erosion extending and occurring. But nature's taken it over, and we could have planted it with pomegranates, fig. You know, look in the soils of these swales. They're moist. They're pretty rich with organic material and they've got a good silt in them. And you just, today, could plant them with seeds that will wait for rain. So that's the sort of thing we could do right through these old swale systems. And there are thousands of miles of them in the United States. I first found these old swales in 1986, 87, and I'd been putting in hundreds of miles of swales, but I couldn't have seen the swales that I've been putting in 60 years' time. And it's just tremendous confidence that you get from finding these old structures that have never been looked at, they've never been repaired, and they've never been noticed by the population. And find they've been quietly working for 60 years without any maintenance. I think it's marvellous, fantastic, actually. They didn't make any mistakes. They did almost everything right. They had a lot of good hydrologists, good engineers, and good common sense, practical people working for them. It's a shame that modern nations can't turn all their people out to repair their country today, God. I'd be really fascinated with that, because the idea of integrating the tribal and wildlife parks is very dear to all of us, as you know. We'll be doing that in Kenya in September, by the way. Okay. In the West, we've been accustomed to reducing areas to desert and then moving our operations elsewhere. But in Africa and in the Kalahari, there are several language groups for whom this desert is their home. So quite obviously, this is an area of great need. It's also a very tough proposition for us to tackle. I've been invited here by some of my student teachers, who are Tswana people, to come into the desert and see some of their tribal students at work. And also bringing some new foods in, because there are more and more people and we need to feed more people. We will have success, because we keep trying, a few of us will have success. And then we must teach other people. The people here were hunter-gatherers, and at one time the desert was thick with game. Cattle have destroyed 60% of the food plants they used to gather. There are very few left indeed. As for the game, the EEC demanded that fences be put across the Kalahari for production of beef. This has successfully killed off most of the migratory animals. So with the death of those animals and the death of their plants, people have to take up gardening, something they're very unused to. In order to address the problems of the remote area dwellers, we've been invited here by the tribal people and the Hansi District Council to see students and teachers at a place called Hrotalakta, where gardening is just beginning.
Sweet potato cake.
In every compound are the animals that were brought in for shelter from lions or from predators the night before. Previously, all the compound and the fencing material was built out of trees, which are now gone. So the first request of any group in the Kalahari will be for barbed wire and for gates, because there's many miles before we come to good tree country. So we're showing how to adapt local material to new conditions. Here we're demonstrating you don't have to cut down a lot of trees to make the walls of a pen. It's a natural goat pen in the middle of a standing clump, and where there is no trees in the circle, the roots are cut below the ground. So you can use living trees to fill the gaps. And it's already quite fertile inside. By the time the goats have been in here for a while, it'll be more fertile. And then we can use it for a garden. And so what we're teaching here is growing your goat pens, not cutting down the environment and making a lot of yards. A well-fenced family compound takes just over 1,000 large acacia trees from the desert, and that means that much of the trees around the settlements are removed simply for fencing. In about 20 years, the termites eat them off, and you have to go look for more trees, but there may be no more trees. So the introduction of just one species here, Euphorbia tyricale, which are close set as cuttings, stop all cattle and goats but are not eaten by them. This is a great benefit because there's no longer any need to cut the trees. Six months ago, we gave a course to the women of East Hanahai, 100 kilometres away, and I was very interested to see how their garden was getting on. Although East Hanahai is extremely dry, 300 people live here. Therefore, any strategy, no matter how small, that we can use to catch water is of great use. Well, this is a runoff pan made of concrete, and the water, the rain comes down and down this pipe and into the underground system where it won't evaporate. And we use exactly the same system to set up wells in the desert for people or for game animals, quail or guinea fowl. We built a pan system here some months ago, costing only $200, and it enables us to get a garden going and seedlings watered. Here we are in the women's garden, and it's just beautiful. The beds are raised so the salt will go down through the soil. The seedlings are in here, and there's a lot of seedling onion. And under here, which look like little huts, there's actually young seedlings for the winter greens. So they're fully shaded in here. Then they're growing very well. In the center of this little mandala bed is an acacia tree. It will provide nitrogen for the beds and shade. And all the natural vegetation has been left in this garden. It doesn't look bare and barren, and it provides the material for the shade houses, and it's just great, actually, considering only November that they got their first course. They've used exactly the same techniques of little shade huts to get their fruit trees going, and this will improve the vitamins in their diet. Yeah, I like this garden very much.
Even this side is...
No, I think it's very good. It's very hard conditions. Once a group of women are well organised in a village, they're the best source for us to work with. Their information is the best, and they are the most motivated. And they prepare progress reports and bring them in for discussion in meetings. The women's report specifically requests help in dealing with the new types of vegetables. In response to requests like this, Dorothy Underbar, one of my first students and now a teacher, has brought some of her friends, and they've come up to show these women at Frotalacta precisely what you do with the vegetables grown in the Kalahari Desert and how to make the best nutritional use of them.
From our inquiries, we found out that people in this district were not used to using melons the way we are going to use it today. The good thing about it is that no part of the melon is thrown away. Right from the stalk, while it has green leaves, we use the green leaves for vegetables. And then we use the young melon for eating. And then when the melon is mature, it's used as I've described. So this is completely new to them, making porridge from the melon pulp.
Melon pulp with sorghum makes a marvellous porridge. No other water's needed. My African students are amazingly efficient in becoming teachers because in Botswana there is a real need for food and nutrition. We'd had 7 years of drought and everybody was beginning to starve. And with real need, human beings organise themselves and respond very quickly.
We were very nervous, and the first day was real hell. We thought the sun would never set. One thing we are happy about is that most of our past participants are very active in permaculture, and especially the Eastern High people, they are looking very successful. The nervousness of the first course is gone, and now we feel confident to face future courses.
When all the work is finished, the traditional songs and dancing that everybody enjoys can begin. People imitate the hunt, and the younger people learn about hunting from the stories, the songs, and the dance. So the system spreads itself and is adapted by each group to their particular needs. I can come back as a visitor, And I know that when I go to the groups that they've been teaching, I will learn a great deal more about permaculture than I know now.
Please ignore your seat number.
Okay.
It's free sitting.
All right. Whenever I'm flying over deserts, I look out the windows a lot. It's because I get a lot of inspiration from the ground patterns and the things I see down below. Here, looking down in Botswana, you see curious dots, and they're caused by a very important insect. Before I left Africa, I went to see an old student, John Turner, who has been studying the ecology of termite mounds. Southern African landscape is dotted with these termite mounds. It's a macrotermes and it's a compost-building termite. It gathers and chops up the grasses. It removes all these grasses by the time the winter's over. Then it builds compost heaps inside the mounds, and it seeds fungal spores into the compost heaps, and it eats the mycelium of the fungi. But on these mounds, which are raised fairly high above the landscape here, a claypan landscape, a flag, grow all sorts of trees.
Probably the best known is the mapani tree, very valuable tree for fodder. It produces extremely good wood. There's many other really useful berry trees, timber trees, medicinal trees, dye trees that are located here.
And many of the farmers plant special crops on here, and of course they collect the flying termites, and they're a valuable addition to diet. So you could say about the termite mounds in Africa, India, and all the deserts, is that they are islands of life and have very important and unique place in the landscape. And we also know that they keep pace with the erosion processes, so they, in fact, the termite preserves the landscape. When we arrive back in Australia and look down at that landscape, we realise we've lost the intricate patterning of nature, and we're looking at an idiotic patterning determined by machines. Here, we can no longer talk about the termites, they're long gone. We can no longer talk about the natural processes that restore the land. There are no natural processes on most of these fields. This is dry, flat land. We'll bring water into it, we'll grow a gigantic amount of crop, and we'll turn it into desert. And when the problems occur, they're devastating. And here the problem is salt. In western central Victoria, everywhere we travel, we see dying trees and salted lands. Nature has rejected our simple solutions. Somehow, in pursuit of limitless food grain, we've created insane, boring landscapes without trees and without people and without anything of interest. There are hundreds of miles of these unlined irrigation canals throughout the irrigation areas and drains off those. And the potential evaporation here is about 18 feet. So as we put the water on these fields, the evaporation takes off the water and leaves the salt. But it also, the water floods down here and picks up further ground salts. So all in all, it's no wonder that in these irrigation lands, the fields flood and salt very easily and rather quickly. As the salt exceeds 1% in soils, it's exuded as crystals wherever the soils start to dry out, and you get a sparkling crystal forest of salt. The first inkling we had of the problem was in 1979. We didn't even have a map of the salt. That was very rapidly established with the aid of all the schools across Victoria. Here the students of Dimboola High School take their salt measuring devices into the local river forest in the middle of winter, and they get a rude shock.
Because they jiggle it up and down, and we're ready to take our first readings when they're steady. Well, it's actually surprising to see the salt that high. It's increased from a couple of months ago.
Years ago, it was just wasn't very salty at all, and now you can, if you get a mouthful, you can really taste the salt.
And I'm allergic to seawater. I come up with bumps, and when I go swimming in here now, I come up with those bumps, just like seawater. So I can't go swimming in the river no more.
Our data we're collecting today, along with schools from roughly 500 or 600 schools around the state, all that data is being sent to the Rural Water Commission in Melbourne, and they'll in turn collate all the data and send it back to the schools in the form of maps. Yeah, I'm just trying. Where's Pink Lake? That's actually salt. Well, that's 3 times as salty as seawater, that reading.
Right.
The channel water in this area isn't suitable for drinking. I mean, it's fine for animals, farm stock to drink, but the town supplies roughly about 1,000 EC units, which is above sort of recommended health levels.
That's right.
Well, it's great that you're doing all that, and it's particularly good to students, I think, see it all and understand what's happening to them. So we know the intensity of salting. We know the extent of the problem. We know the rate of increase of salting in Australia, and it's enormous. And we know the only thing to do is to lower the water table. And we know the only way to lower the water table is to reforest the catchments. And we have a lot of trials out that will tell us what trees we can use in what areas of the catchment. Trees are effectively non-mechanical pumps. They can pump the water table down, and with it drops the salt. But it's a matter of advancing from areas that are clean enough to hold trees to areas which are just beginning to salt. We can't plant the trees and pump down the water table and continue the irrigation system and expect the trees to survive. So we've got to make some sort of choice between irrigation and survival, our survival. If you would like to see what these areas will look like in 10 years' time, we have to take you to Arizona, where in 1940 they irrigated cotton for the war effort. This is what you can do to a healthy desert. Once you've cleared it, mined it for cotton, salted it, abandoned it, and left it to blow away. This salt pan was a cotton field, irrigated cotton during the war. This was a mesquite tree, which would germinate about here somewhere, and this would all have been soil. The rate of soil formation here is very slow. It's 1 millimetre per 1,000 years, which is much slower than most areas. But it's dry and it's very flat, so that's understandable. The dust from the clay pan obliterated the roads, and there were accidents. So the Department of Roads and others drew small banks and sowed four-wing saltbush on them. What we see along here now is four-wing saltbush, but the mound is gone. It's blown away, and it's also melted down, deflocculated, because the soil is full of salt. However, it did stop the dust going across the highway. Beyond that, no attempt to rehabilitate the salt pan has been made, although it's possible to do so. The fact that the only rehabilitation we've attempted here is to protect the automobile says a lot about this society. We have the technologies to fix up and bring back into production a lot of eroded desert. We'll go and look at one of these techniques invented by Bob Dixon, an agricultural scientist. It's a great machine.
Good to see you.
Good. I've come to have a look at your machine, see what you're doing here. Get some explanations. It's a curious thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is quite different. Pitters are fairly common, but this does make pits. We refer to it as a land imprinter.
These drive that rubber tie?
Yes, these angles are imprinting teeth. They will make funnel-shaped depressions in the soil, which will, in fact, funnel the rainwater and seed together so that you can take a little rainwater and get the seeds to germinate and to become established. People sometimes think that maybe it'll make rain. I don't claim that it's a rainmaker, but it's a rain stretcher. So this 8-pointed star turns out to be the ideal configuration. The importance of this design is the fact that it takes not nearly so much weight to push the angles into the soil.
Well, once the soil's pitted and the wind blows, 86% of all seed ends up in the pits, and that's in nature. But as well as the seed, little bits of manure like rabbit manure and sheep manure, they all roll into the pits. And So whether I put it in the pit or not, it'll get there in the first wind. Most of that will get into the bottom of the pit. And then, when it rains, then these pits will infiltrate as much as 15 inches of wet soil. And round them, you'll only get infiltration of a very little water. So you can see that they're totally beneficial for kicking life back into the desert. So this is a stark contrast.
Yeah, this is the way it looked before it was imprinted. Just,
yeah, you like that?
It's essentially barren, and where all the water either runs off the barren surface or evaporates.
So 82 you imprinted. Did you see it at the time or not?
Yes, this was
spectacular.
As well. When rain occurs here, it obviously sees nothing but the grass, and so the soil surface remains open and receptive to rainwater. And you can see that if the water is not lost by surface evaporation and runoff, it can grow a tremendous amount of vegetation. Somebody once said that man has left a desert in his footprints wherever he's gone. Well, I think you can see that in this case we created a beautiful prairie in the footprints of a land imprinter.
We can use technologies to restore the present deserts to the original prairies that they once were. We can bring back the wonderful complex of animal species that once yielded so much from the prairies of North America and Africa. They were highly productive for protein and much more productive than the beef that succeeded them. And the beef, after all, were responsible for the deserts. If we can do that, and it is our duty, I think, to do it as stewards of Earth, then our grandchildren may be able to see something of the abundance that their great-grandparents encountered when they first came to those continents.